Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar on flying solo with multiple sclerosis. My name is Ann Gilbert, and I'm the Programs Manager for Can Do MS, and I'll be your moderator this evening. For those of you who are new to Can Do MS, we are an innovative provider for lifestyle empowerment programs for people who live with MS and for their support partners. We help to empower people to move beyond their MS by giving them the knowledge, skills, tools, and confidence to adopt healthy lifestyle behaviors to actively co-manage their disease and live their best lives. And it is through our programs that you see here on our screen that we try to achieve this. You can visit our website at www.mscando.org/programs to learn about all of the programs that we have to offer. We have our 4-day Can Do program that we do once a year. We have our Jumpstart program that we take around the country, and we do that about 5 times a year. And we have our 2-day Take Charge program. And of course, we also have our webinar series that you're participating in tonight. And please keep in mind that this webinar is being recorded, and you'll be able to view the archived recording starting tomorrow on our website at mscando.org. You can also connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. Be sure to look for us on all of those social media sites, like us on Facebook, and connect with us on Twitter. Find us on YouTube, and you can find and learn about all of our upcoming events and programs, and also find some fun pictures on our Facebook page to see what we're up to. And so just a few housekeeping issues before we get into our webinar. We will be saving the last 10 to 15 minutes of at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. If you do have a question, you'll notice that there is a chat feature located on the left-hand bottom of your computer screen. And you can submit any question or type in any comment in that box that says Chat with Presenters. Just type in your comment and hit send. We will be monitoring and looking for your questions, and we'll be able to address as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. And because this presentation is being recorded and archived on our website, we have muted everyone's telephone lines that are calling in. So don't worry about muting your lines from your end. It's already muted. And before we get started, I did just kind of want to poll our audience tonight, especially with this topic. We're curious to know who's joining us this evening, and to learn a little bit more about you. So you should see a question that's popping up on your screen, and we're just curious how old you are. So if you can answer this question for us, and we can get started. So it looks like the majority of our audience is between the ages of 51 and 60. And we have several, a bulk between 41 and 50 and 61 and 70. So we're very excited to have all of you join us. All right. So now I'd like to introduce our presenters for tonight's webinar. You see on your screen here Dr. Peggy Crawford. Dr. Crawford's training and clinical experience as a health psychologist for more than 20 years have afforded her the unique opportunity to work with and learn from individuals and families living with MS. She has had the privilege to share in the life stories that define the journey over the course of MS and reflected these stories in presentations, research projects, and publications. The courage that women and men with MS display when facing difficult challenges has been an inspiration in Dr. Crawford's work and in her personal life. As a member of the staff at the MS Center at the Cleveland Clinic, the Can Do family, and most recently the Department of Neurology at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, she has had the opportunity to connect with professionals as well as individuals with MS and their families. These relationships have nourished her passion for working in the field of chronic illness just as time in Maine has nourished her soul. Welcome, Peggy. And we also have joining with us Linda Wallace. Linda Wallace has been a practicing occupational therapist for approximately 25 years, with the majority of those years at the University of Maryland Medical Center. Her experience has been in many areas, including neurology, neurosurgery, and trauma. Many of those years has been spent working on inpatient rehabilitation units. Recently, she has been working with children who have fine motor coordination and visual perceptual difficulties. She has also been a member of the Can Do MS's program staff since 1993. And we are very excited to welcome both Peggy and Linda, and I'd like to now give Peggy the floor.
Thank you, Anne. It's great to be here with everyone tonight, and I'm so happy that we're doing this program as a webinar because I've been spending a lot of time in Boston, and we've had our third week of 2 feet of snow. So I would not be able to travel anywhere, so it's great that we're doing the webinar. We wanted to talk about flying solo with MS tonight, and clearly people get to being soloists with MS in many different ways, some by choice, some by circumstance. For example, people who are single or divorced or widowed and not in a committed relationship are probably flying solo with MS. People living independently. It's important to realize that flying solo doesn't mean always being alone, because in fact sometimes people have family around them, but their family is very chaotic or very focused on their own lives and not available to them. And sometimes family is there, but they just don't get MS. I'm sure many of you have had that experience where people just don't understand it. Single parents are flying solo, so they may have even adult children, young adult children in the home, but they're really flying solo when it comes to their MS. Living with others but feeling alone and not supported, or in fact wanting to be alone, so that you can see that sort of we define flying solo with MS in different ways. There are clearly some potential benefits to flying solo, and most of you probably recognize Amelia Earhart. When you're flying solo, your opinion carries a lot of weight. You are able to make your own choices and decisions based on your needs and preferences and less on the needs and preferences of other people. Now, this is somewhat limited when you're in a household with other people. You can exercise more control literally over your space, your lifestyle, treatments for your MS or other conditions, and the choices that you make about your activities and how you spend your time. As you deal with difficult situations that come up through life and with your MS, you can build confidence and communicate this to other people so that they understand through your example how you're managing your MS. And obviously, you can experience independent living, which is something that a lot of people want to do. Tonight, Linda and I wanted to share with you a couple of examples of people who, and these case examples are really composites of people that we've worked with over the years. And we hope that as we talk about how some strategies and techniques might be helpful to our cases, that you'll identify with something that might be helpful to you as well. So our first case is Sue, who is a 44-year-old single, never married woman with progressive MS. Because of her MS, she hasn't been able to work outside the home for the last 7 years, and she's on Social Security disability. She lives alone by choice in an apartment. She uses a wheelchair out in the community and a rollator in her apartment. And she's been really struggling recently with falling on almost a daily basis. And she struggles with fatigue, as do over 90% of a very common symptom. She has family who live locally, but they are always seeming to be busy, involved in their own lives, and so she's hesitant to ask them to assist her. Plus, they tend to be pretty bossy and give her a lot of advice whether she wants it or not. She does have home care 4 times a week. This can be problematic because sometimes people don't show up consistently, or she has a different person every time, or the company changes. Sue tends to spend a lot of time alone in her apartment, and she has difficulty trusting people, in part because of some real experiences that she's had. So you can see she's experiencing some difficulties flying solo with her MS. And Linda, I think you have another case example to share with us.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Peggy. The second case example is Mr. Joe. Mr. Joe is a middle-aged man. He lives alone, though his family is in the general area. Even though they're in the area, they're not really available on a daily basis. And because he's currently working full-time, I think he deals with the fact everybody thinks he must be functioning perfectly normal, or because he gets up and goes to work every day. He does still work full time, but he is stressed because of his fatigue and how that interferes with him having to get through the workday as well as other responsibilities of managing his household. Previously, he enjoyed outdoor activities. So this is just a little scenario, and as we move along, I'll bring up some other situations that Joe has had to make decisions about. And Peggy, I think you were going to go back over some of the challenges our
Yes.
MS people were
Thanks,
dealing
Linda.
with.
Yeah, I think when flying solo, just as there are potential benefits, there are possible challenges. You know, when you're on your own, sometimes it's hard to recognize when you're overwhelmed, in part because you don't want to sometimes recognize that, and also because you're not really receiving feedback from anybody other than yourself. It's hard to know when you need a co-pilot. So often when you are flying alone, you know, you may want to be the only pilot, but sometimes in life, even without MS, we need a co-pilot. You might need help, but you don't want help. Sometimes when flying solo, people tend to take more risks physically. So with Sue, she might be taking more risks, and this is resulting in her falling more regularly. Emotionally, people take risks, sometimes becoming involved in relationships that aren't necessarily so healthy for them, and financially, spending their money in ways that puts them in jeopardy. People may end up coping in unhealthy ways, eating too much, drinking too much alcohol, smoking, shopping online, which jeopardizes their financial health. Sometimes without that feedback loop of other people, people get stuck in ineffective behavioral cycles. For example, people get really good at talking themselves out of things instead of talking themselves into things. And also sometimes people with MS, like other chronic conditions, tend to focus on how they're different and how they don't have anything in common with people, which makes it hard for them to connect rather than what they have in common. Also, when flying solo, social isolation and depression are real possibilities. So I wanted to talk a bit more tonight about navigating your emotional health. And in fact, when people registered for the program tonight, we had a lot of concerns and questions raised about mood and depression. So we wanted to talk about that specifically. It's very important to stay connected to your MS and your non-MS communities. And people can do this through support groups, and if you can't travel or you live rurally or you don't drive, there are support groups that function by phone. You can go to educational programs and staying connected to friends, family, organizations that have been meaningful in your life before to give yourself some balance. Also, the Internet is a tremendous place in many ways. And in preparing for this program, I was looking up, there are a lot of sites for people just with chronic health problems, which were very interesting and said things that I found very applicable to MS. I encourage people to clean out their friendship closet. And what I mean by this is if you have somebody that's a real downer, that kind of soaks up your emotional resources and just is not much fun to be around, that may be somebody you don't really want to spend a lot of time with. I encourage people to accept invitations even when they think they might not want to go, or they're feeling too depressed, or they're feeling too fatigued, because often once people go, they feel a bit better. It takes their mind off their own problems. It's helpful to identify a purpose for your life. This could be providing support to somebody else in your life, having something to focus on, feeling something to feel good about. I also encourage people to leave home for more than medical appointments. And challenging yourself with a new activity. Learn to do something new. It doesn't have to be something big, but something new that kind of gets your brain really going and you can take an active interest in. You want to find ways to comfort yourself and create a self-care kit, including a home sanctuary. And what I mean by that is it could be a a chair. It could be a place that you sit by the window and you watch the birds, where you can take some deep breaths. You can do some stretching, just kind of emptying your mind and focusing on what you see out that window. It's very helpful for stress reduction. And not least of which, you want to seek treatment for significant depression. Depression in MS is a really important topic because depression differs from normal grieving. A lot of people with MS are told, well, of course you feel sad. You have MS, who wouldn't feel sad? But in fact, I think normal grieving tends to get better gradually over time, and that sadness goes away. Or certainly improves, and it's not associated with a lot of these symptoms that I'm going to mention in a minute that are related to depression. Also, people with MS are at much greater risk than the general population for developing depression, and people with other chronic illnesses as well. So more than 50% of people with MS will experience a significant depression at some point over the course of their disease. This is 3 times the general population. So 10 to 15% of people out there in the general population will experience depression. So you can see that the risk is much greater. So what can you do about depression? First of all, just recognizing, acknowledging the symptoms. These are symptoms that last longer than 2 weeks. This is just how it's defined officially. Loss of interest in pleasurable things. And this doesn't mean not doing things because you're so fatigued. This means literally not experiencing joy or pleasure in doing them anymore. Significant changes in some of your physical functions like your appetite, sleep patterns. The typical sleep pattern for someone with depression is that they can fall asleep, but they can't stay asleep, so they wake very early in the morning and get inadequate sleep. Feelings of sadness, hopelessness, despair, and sometimes with this, thoughts of suicide. It's important to talk to your doctor. Let someone know that you're feeling this way, because again, if you're not around people, you might not be getting feedback that someone's concerned about your mood. It's important for you to know that depression is very treatable, and it responds best to a combination of medication and counseling. Medication that's taken on a regular basis, and counseling that can be identified through organizations like the MS Society or through your state's psychological association, and seeking out people who have experience seeing other folks with chronic illness, even if it's not MS. You know, we mentioned fatigue for both Sue and for Joe. And I know, Linda, as an occupational therapist, you have lots of great ideas about how people can manage their fatigue. Could you share those with us?
Sure, Peggy. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking to people about fatigue management. First off, though, I'd like to just give a definition. A definition by the MS Council is a subjective lack of physical or mental energy. And the reason I say subjective is there's no test out there. There's no blood work that we can do. There's no measurement that actually gives us a number. And so there are ways that people can explain themselves. But again, that amount of fatigue a person feels is very personal, and how it interferes with what you do or want to do is where we really get into our individual definition of fatigue for each person. The problem we run into is we call it sometimes the hidden symptom for this exact reason, the fact that there is no test out there that measures it. It may not be something that's visible. It's not necessarily the way somebody walks or the fact that they need oxygen or something of that nature, which is very noticeable for people. So because you walk around and you're still active in your life, but still you may be heavily influenced by fatigue. So the first step of I have several principles I would like to talk to you about in terms of managing your fatigue. However, the first step I do suggest is that you do have a discussion with your doctor. And so I put down here a little scenario for you to kind of get grips of your fatigue before you go in to talk to your physician. And that begins with just starting to monitor a little bit. Do you feel it comes on right from the get-go in the morning when you get up? Is it halfway through the day? Whatever your situation is, try to take note of it and see if it changes within the day. Does it change between week to week, and those kind of factors. Next, you want to take notice of how it truly interferes. What do you find you're not able to do? And then finally, when you have kind of gathered some information about how this fatigue is impacting your lifestyle, then the first step would be to take this information and share it with your doctor. This is a personal decision between you and your doctor. There are medications out there, and I certainly am not qualified to sit here and talk to you about that. That's a personal thing, again, between you and your doctor. However, it's an important step, and I do bring it up because I think it's very important that you take that step along with the other principles that I'm going to be discussing with you. The next step I want to talk about are the basic ideas of management for your MS. And as I had mentioned before, what you first want to do is you want to identify your needs and your priorities. So how do you do this? Well, you kind of go back and look at your day. How are you spending your day? How much time goes for work? How much time goes for errands at home? How much time goes for how much time do you actually allow for sleep, or do you need for sleep? How much time have you carved out for leisure or social activities? So, and this does vary from day to day, and it varies from week to week. So you kind of have to take several days or several weeks into your ideas on, okay, maybe Monday through Friday, work takes the biggest chunk of my time, but then on weekends, I can reduce that a little bit, and I have a little bit of different scenario on weekends. Maybe that's when I need more sleep. Maybe that's when I do my social activities. However, the important thing is to take time to write this down, because sometimes we may feel like our work responsibilities are consuming, but what we haven't taken into account is some of the other components of our life. The next thing you want to do is you want to look at what things maybe were big components of your life but are not as important. And that is one thing you have to take into consideration, is that we all have limits. Before you worked full time, or you may have had plenty of time for leisure, but now you're working, and working's exhausting, and it's still a priority in life, so maybe that's taking more of your time and energy. So we all have limits. We have to recognize those limits, and now we want to try to make a balance amongst our responsibilities, our needs, and eventually we come to the idea that we have to make choices. There are things that we'd like to do today, tomorrow, and then there are things we need to do now. And if you've looked at that scheme of your lifestyle, how you've spent your time, and whether it's on weekdays more of it's work, and on weekends there's more time for you, then that will help you as we move to the next step, which is choosing and identifying your priorities. So these are the next principles that I want to go over. I tried to start all of them with a P so that they'll be easy for you to remember. Some of the basic principles are prioritize, plan, pace, and positioning. And now I'd like to take a minute to go over each one of these a little bit. Prioritize. This is probably one of the hardest things for all of us to do, because we all see lots of priorities in our life. And the problem is you only have so much energy, and if everything is a priority, eventually you're going to run out of energy to do them all. So we do have to sit down and make some choices. And those choices for our priorities can change. So for Monday through Friday, those choices of using our energy and our priority might be work. However, that could change on weekends. So making a choice, making a priority is very important. However, you do understand that sometimes these priorities will change from week to week, from day to day, as long as you make an active decision as to what that priority is for today. The next step or principle I'd like to talk about is plan. When you schedule something and you've made it a priority, the chances are that that priority will actually occur. So even though you may say, well, I'm just going to do my exercise on the weekend, if you don't take a little bit of time to plan and plan when it's going to happen, and then you run some errands and then you relax a little bit, before you know it, you didn't follow through with that priority, which was to get a little bit of exercise or leisure or social events going on. So my suggestion is to try to plan a little bit in advance so that if the priority is a social event or a leisure activity or an exercise, make that one of the first things that you organize for your weekend, and then try to slowly build in your other priorities that are maybe not as important on that particular day. The other thing about planning is if you plan, then you are going to make an active step to allow time for that event to occur. Because when we try to do too many things, then we're not planning as well, not taking into account that our energy levels are not going to last forever, and that becomes stressful. And again, the more we feel stressed, that more that adds to fatigue. So we want to step back. Let's make a plan, and so that we include rest times and we include our priorities. Pacing. Pacing, I've included our little picture of the hare and the tortoise because in effect, we all still need to remember, even if it's slow and steady, there's a good chance we're going to get there, and that's what I want to encourage. If we have a plan, we go about it smooth and methodically, the chances are we'll be better able to get through those activities that we've set aside as our priority. Positioning. Here, I think I've included a picture of Mr. Joe. He's understanding that one of the things he may have to change is how he's done some of his activities. And so sometimes we have to think about our positioning. If we change how we do things, it may not be as fatiguing. It may be more supportive. It might be safer, and therefore we're able to engage in those outdoor activities that we enjoy. And so positioning can be very important. If you're sitting while you're doing something, you're conserving some of your energy. If you're using good lighting and you're not having to get up and down repeatedly, then you've done good positioning, and you can maybe conserve that energy so that you'll last longer in the activity you're about to do or the next thing you need to do. With Mr. Joe, he's exploring some new ways to be outside and enjoying the outdoors, which is one of his hobbies that he likes. The next concept I want to go over is the idea of modifying and adapting. And I've tried to throw out some pictures. These are only just a few pictures of the many ways that we can modify the way we do things, the way we adapt things. We may find that we enjoy or we feel we benefit from exercise, but it's hard to get motivated. Well, maybe a commitment to a class where even if we just can go once every so many weeks, that may give us that satisfaction of being a part of an exercise group, and attending that class will get us planning and organizing so that we follow through with one of our priorities. adapting. Maybe we need to pull out that crock pot. If we use the crock pot, we put some things in, we can make a big dinner, spread it out over a couple of days. We don't necessarily exhaust ourselves cooking it, and it's a win-win situation. Here we have a gentleman on what's called a stair glide. Sometimes moving is not always one of the options we have at the time. However, if steps are an issue and steps are causing fatigue because the bathroom is upstairs or because we feel like they're so exhausting to go up and down, sometimes we have to adapt. We have to get things like a stair glide, which will take us up to the upper level or bring us down, and it's not as exhausting. Then we have a gentleman here on a computer. And as we all know, with the computer, we have access to so many things. We have access to modifying our work situation. We can do our shopping online, multiple things. We can do some reading. We can engage in webinars where we enjoy learning about new things. So again, it's in modifying the way we may have done it in the past, but it still keeps us engaged. And then our little picture of the car, where sometimes if we join groups or join a carpool or find ways to share rides with other people, then we not only can get out and about, but we also can feel like I'm not comfortable with driving, but if I join with some other people, then maybe I am not doing the driving as often. In this situation, again, Mr. Joe has found that using the computer, he can do some of his work from home, which then gives him a little bit more flexibility in his schedule and reflects back his priority, which is at this time to continue working full-time. Another principle I'd like to talk about with our energy management or in our fatigue management is organize. As I've said before, if we prioritize things, we plan for them, then we will do our best to use our energy wisely. Did we incorporate rest periods? So when I talked about positioning may be you need to lay down a little bit. Is there something you can read while you're lying down so that keeps us energized because we're in a better position? If you keep a routine, it helps you stay organized. And just as we were talking about being organized, we seem to be more efficient. And so I included just a little quick note. Sometimes we have to put on our list to sit down and make our list so that we can actually set our priorities, organize, and get through them. On that idea of organization, I do want to put out there that just recently the Can Do MS webinar series had a webinar called Get Motivated to Get Organized. And if you feel like this is a concept or an idea that you could benefit from, I suggest that you go ahead and take a couple minutes to go back in and enjoy listening to that webinar also. And finally, what I would like to do is on all these principles, I want to emphasize the importance of building your resources. These resources should definitely include the National MS Society, your local chapter of the MS Society. Your resources can be local learning about the mobility in your area, local bus services, delivery services, whether it be for food, delivery of groceries, anything that can support you so that if you feel a day when you need to plan for some other activities, you have, let me go back and look at my resources. I know of these 2 places where I can order some healthy food. Another resource might be home maintenance services or cleaning services. And, of course, there are people who say, well, that's exactly what I need. Where do I find those people? And what I suggest is that you go back to your local chapter of your MS Society and share with what's going on in other people's lives and people they recommend. Check out their resources, check out their suggestions, and slowly build your selection of resources that work for you. And again, that will change from place to place, so that's why it's an individual's resource list, but it is important that you build those resources for yourself so that you have somebody to call upon when you need something. And now I believe, Peggy, you wanted to also contribute to our ideas of fatigue and management?
Yes, thank you, Linda. You know, Linda's given you lots and lots of great ideas about how to manage fatigue more effectively. I think it's also really important to remember that your attitude about your MS and how you behave, the decisions that you make, also affect your fatigue. So, you know, when you have MS, you're the captain of the team, but MS is pretty much always going to be a team member. So if your approach is to try to live like you don't have MS, that's probably going to work against you. You want to consider your MS when you're making decisions, like about if you're going to go on an outing and how you go about that and whether you use an assistive device to help you conserve your energy. So you want, but I think to not go on outings or do things because of your fatigue is giving it too much weight. You want to try to balance the costs and benefits of expending your energy. I've known a lot of people over the years who, when they have a good energy day, overdo it, and then they're kind of down for 2 or 3 days. So they kind of then lose that time. So you want to think about the costs and the benefits and not just the benefits of overdoing. Also, people often have a tendency to put themselves last. So they get what's left over at the end of the day because they've been doing for other people. But you want to put yourself first at least some of the time. You want to be flexible about how you do things because doing things in a different way can still get them done. It might be at a different time of day. It might be over 2 or 3 days rather than 1, but you are likely to manage your fatigue better. You want to view change as an opportunity for creativity rather than change as another loss. Sometimes people just haven't had to change how they do something, but they find out that there really are other options. And when they try them, they find they not only were able to accomplish something, but maybe were not as fatigued afterwards. And then there's always the issue of asking for help, and we know that that's a very difficult one for many people. So we wanted to talk a bit about that because often people want and need support and assistance, but there are so many things that you say to yourself about why not to go there. People aren't trustworthy, and that's true of some people. They really aren't. But there are also some people out there who really are trustworthy. So sometimes you have to take some risks and try some other people. You make assumptions that people are too busy, and some people are, and some people clearly communicate that, but not everybody is. Sometimes you worry that things won't get done the way you want them, so you should just do it yourself. And it's true. If you have someone help you, it may not be identical. It's a sign of weakness, many people think, to ask for help, and that really becomes an obstacle. You feel that nobody understands your unique situation. And I have to tell you, when I went online and looked at some of the other chronic illness sites and people talking with each other, there are lots of things that people feel if they focus on what's unique about them, it really keeps them from connecting with other people and getting the assistance that they need. It's a slippery slope, people believe, to if you start asking for help that you're going to totally lose control of your MS management and your life. And some people honestly believe that if they don't do something that they've always done, for example, if they go to the zoo in a wheelchair with their family instead of walking, that their legs will get weaker. And we know that's not the case. And in fact, using an adaptive device can allow you to actually be more active and use your energy more efficiently. So that process of asking for help, that challenge, how to do it. And in fact, we know some people who registered tonight when actually said, I know I need help, but I honestly don't know how to ask for it. It really helps if you do some thinking about what is it that you really need and want help with. You want to be specific in your thinking, but also when you go to make a request of somebody, you want to be really specific. There's a big difference between saying to somebody, I really need some help, and I need a ride to a doctor's appointment in 2 weeks. Or I need you to carry up the laundry basket versus nobody ever helps me. It does help if you can plan ahead and give people notice so that they can plan for assisting you. And you want to remember that something done differently is still better than not done at all. Some people are good. You're good at something. You have skills that you can trade with people. This is kind of the old way that people did things. They traded services with each other. So you may be good at setting up websites, and somebody else could do your grocery shopping for you. So think about what your skill set is. People really often do want to help, but they just need direction. They really don't know what you need, but sometimes they think they do. That's even harder. So also when people help you, you want to give them useful feedback. And again, be really specific. When you did such and such, that was a really big help to me. Here's something about that I'd like you to tweak for the next time. So you can give constructive feedback and be appreciative, and that really goes a long way. Linda, I think you're going to help us see how help can come in other forms aside from other people.
Yes, Peggy, that is the next area I'd like to talk about, because help can come in different forms. It can come in the form of equipment or a technique, which is going to reduce your vulnerability and ultimately increases your safety. So I included a bunch of pictures, and I realized that this is just a little bit of what's out there. And so I want to go over some of those, but I also want to recommend some basic ideas on keeping safe in your community. And the first thing is always let your local fire department know. If you have a physical status where you might need assistance to get out of your house in case of an emergency, or you you might be slower, it's always a good idea to call the local fire department and let them know who you are, where you're living. Along this same thing, with being aware of what's out there, talk to your physician. Make sure that you get something as simple as a handicapped license plate or the tag in the car to give you access to parking in a closer range to the area of things that you need to get into. Also, talk with your physician about possibly seeing a physical therapist or a speech pathologist or one of the many rehabilitation professionals that are out there that can give you ideas, suggestions, things for your safety. For instance, the pictures. When do I need a cane? When do I need to move to a walker? These are questions that you ultimately have to make, but you can always talk to a physical therapist, talk to your doctor, and get some recommendations so that you feel more knowledgeable when you do have to make these decisions. As I said, things that are out there to help you with your safety, there's walkers out there that have seats on them so you can sit down. So when you're at the store and you have to stop and stand in line, rather than just stopping and standing, you can actually sit down while you're waiting. There are the lower picture shows a brace on a gentleman's leg. If you are having problems where you're falling and you think it might be that you're tripping because you're not picking your feet up, or for some reason it looks like there must be something on the ground that you keep tripping on, but there's never anything there, that may be an indicator that you're having a little bit of an issue with your foot is not coming up as high as used to, and that's what's causing you to trip. In that type of situation, a brace can be given to you to help you so that you are not falling. You're safer with your walking and not falling. This, again, is something that you should discuss with your physician and a physical therapist. In the grocery stores or in a lot of different types of stores, the big warehouse stores, the carts, don't feel embarrassed. Go ahead and use those carts, because if it's going to make you safer to get around those big stores and not fatigue you, it's important. Even if there are no outward signs of your MS, that's not what's the important factor. You have to remember what's important to you. And if it's important that you want to get your grocery shopping done, or you want to be able to shop around and leisurely look at things, then use the cart. If it's going to help you do what you need to get done, then use it. It's not about what other people may be thinking. The final picture is some banisters. Sometimes it may seem like such a simple thing to add a banister for the other side of the steps, but it can make a big difference. If you find coming out of the house, when you hold on to that banister on the right side, seems to make it very easy to get down, but for some reason you always assumed it was because you were coming home and at that point you were tired, and that's why going up the steps was so difficult. It may just be that you needed a banister on the right-hand side, whether it's going in or coming out. So adding that second banister can be such a simple thing, but can increase your safety and increase your independence. Safety in the community is one thing, and then there's also safety in the home. Safety in the home, again, I've included a couple simple pictures. They include several different areas in your home. We often think of the bathroom, and of course it's very important to consider having safety rails in the bathroom, next to the shower, next to the commode. It could be a chair in the bathroom, just so that you can sit down and enjoy that warm shower, or washing your hair, or taking the time to lather up and rinse off. There's chairs that are out there. You can buy them on the internet. You can get them through pharmacies and delivery services where they have medical equipment. There's also something as simple as a bath mat that keeps you from slipping inside the shower as well as outside of the shower. It's all about being safe and preventing the fall. Safety equipment in the kitchen. It could be something as simple as, once again, using the crock pot, saving your energy so that you're not trying to cook when you're tired at the end of the day. Or maybe eating healthy is one of those priorities that you've made for yourself, and so rather than always ordering out food, because by the time the end of the day happens, you don't have the energy to make yourself something, rather than ordering out and not necessarily getting that healthy vegetable soup that you've been thinking about, put it in the crock pot, think about it ahead of time, plan for it, and when you get home, it's ready. As I showed in the picture of the kitchen, it looks like a typical kitchen, except we have a chair in the kitchen, a chair to keep you positioned so that you're conserving energy, you're more stable while you're doing some activities in the kitchen. We also have gotten rid of scatter rugs or other obstacles that you might be falling over as you're maneuvering around in the kitchen. Whatever it is, you want to set yourself up so that things are easy to maneuver. You have a heavy pot, you can move it right to the island where you put your vegetables in it, or maybe you even have a cooktop in that island so that you don't have to do as much carrying from one surface to the next. in the study. It could be something as simple as making sure you have arms on the chair and that you have the desk and the chair at a comfortable height so that you're well relaxed while you're working. Do you have proper lighting? Do you keep things all in the study close by so that when you sit down to do something, you don't have to repeatedly get up and go to another room or another area to get the stamps or the envelopes or whatever you may be you need for the task you're about to take care of? In the family room, do you have things set up so that there's, again, obstacles are minimized? We have a scatter rug in this one. It is kind of flat, but if it's in the way or something that you're going to trip over, then get rid of it. The idea is safety. You want good lighting. You want chairs that have armrests on them so you can get up and down. Keep things at good height so it's easy for you to get up and down rather than these deep, low chairs that you feel like you have to crawl to get yourself back out of. A banister. Maybe it's something just when you walk from the carpeting to the hardwood floor, you need a little something to stabilize against so that as you change surfaces, you don't find yourself off balance and at risk for a fall. These are simple modifications that you can make in your home that will just increase your safety. And safety is important because if you're safe, you don't fall, then you're not going to be hurt, then you have more independence to do the things you want. And Peggy, I believe you also had some other ideas you'd like to add regarding safety?
Right. Thanks, Linda. I also think that a lot of the things that you just talked about would be great, particularly for Sue, the example that I described early in the course of our webinar. So lots of great ideas. I think there are some additional strategies that people can put into place that would help them reduce their vulnerability and risk. And I know sometimes it's hard to find someone, but identifying someone you trust with whom you can discuss concerns and exchange honest feedback. Sometimes that's a family member, sometimes it's a friend, a coworker, sometimes it's a professional, a therapist who will give you honest feedback and where you are really, they're there for you. Identifying resources through other soloists, through groups, online, through other can-do programs. For example, I know we had a lot of questions come in at registration about travel, and we had a can-do webinar on travel back in June of 2014, so I would encourage people to go ahead and take a look at that. Also, there's a great TSA site for people who want to travel by air for what to do with your equipment, if you have a wheelchair, and so on and so forth. And the National MS Society, you can get online and just go to the top right and put in any topic you want, and all kinds of documents will come up. Also, educational programs that haven't yet occurred, like there's a great one coming up on working, employment in March that people could take a look at. And soloists are likely to know about these things as well. You want to develop effective coping skills for dealing with stress and practice them on a very regular and preferably everyday basis. So these are things like even stretching, deep breathing, meditation, giving yourself a time out when you're feeling stressed and taking some time to really make those decisions and develop options for yourself. And you want to maintain healthy boundaries with your space. So if you're living independently and you're good with that, but somebody else wants to move in with you and you really don't want to do that, that old word no, I understand you want to do that, but that's not going to work for me. So protecting your space, protecting your feelings, so being cautious. It's okay to be cautious about the relationships you get into and how you make yourself emotionally vulnerable, and also protecting your money, reducing your vulnerability there. And Linda, I think you had some ideas about how to keep your finances secure.
You're right. Thank you, Peggy. Talking about financial security, just like safety with your emotions, safety within the home and in the environment, you also need to practice some basic financial safety techniques. Some of the simple ideas were maintain a list of your credit card numbers and bank accounts. It's always a good thing to have things written down so that you keep track of things. If something was to occur, you know right away, let me go back to my list. Where was my credit card? My credit card number is this. The contact number is this. Keep a list with your bank account numbers so you don't become overwhelmed with some emergency, a situation occurs and you need to quickly come up with your numbers. If you have that list, you keep it in a handy place, then you always have that security of knowing you have the information that's important. Maintain an organized system for bills. Hopefully a lot of people have moved to some simple use of the online banking so that you don't have to worry about running out to mail things or having somebody else on your checking account to take care of things. Keep an organized system. Whether online billing is your thing or not is just another one of the suggestions. Make sure you check and save your receipts. Sometimes you may have to order things online or have somebody else run an errand for you, which is great. But keep those receipts because things do happen, things do break, and you want to be able to keep tabs of how your money was spent. Was it something that was very costly, and you want to be able to return that if you have to. On that note, with costs and expenses, consider writing down your budget so that if some special occasion occurs and you feel like, oh, I can't do that social event, my budget's not going to allow for that, write down a budget and try to plan so that when some special event comes up, you feel like you can work around that so that you can take time, energy, money to do something pleasurable for yourself. Check references or use bonded repair companies so that you know that when you do hire somebody, you feel confident that the person you've hired is not going to overcharge you, or if they are charging you a little bit more, it's because they're bonded and you know that you can trust the work that they're going to do. And then, of course, this is how you build your resources because you find those people that you can trust and have good references. Identify someone who you can share your financial information or your financial planning with. And on that idea of financial planning, there are financial planning services that are offered from the National MS Society. And those are something that we having somebody to talk to discuss your financial plans is always a good thing to consider, and this is another reference. On the note of maintaining your money, remember, this person might be helping you and you really appreciate that, but that may not be a good reason for you to go co-sign on one of their loans. You need to remember your financial security is important. As a soloist, you need to make your financial stability first, and co-signing on somebody else's loan may not be the best thing for you. So please keep that in mind. On that same note, don't allow others to borrow your credit card numbers. You can usually take care of things online with your credit card. There's places like Target today where you can actually make the purchase online, and then if you have somebody who's willing to run an errand or help you out, they can go and just use your the number that is for the item and go pick it up. So you don't necessarily have to give them money, and you don't need to share your credit card information with them. So again, you always just want to keep confidential with important information such as credit cards and financial information. And back to you, Peggy, on some other ideas on relationships.
Yes, I think often people realize that after MS, sometimes things seem to change in their relationships, and just relating to people can be difficult. You might find that there are some people in your life that after your MS and as if you become disabled, people sort of fade away. They kind of move away from you because they can't handle it or it's too much. Other people move closer. Sometimes it's people that you never even anticipated that you might get close to, become a source of support and mutual support. There are going to be people who offer you lots of advice and assistance, and maybe assistance the way they want to do things and not necessarily the way you want to do things. Sometimes it's useful just to express appreciation for the advice, acknowledge that you have lots of advice and lots of ideas about how to do things, and so you're going to kind of pick and choose what you do. Other people are really pretty uninvolved and offer little advice and little assistance. So people are a little bit unpredictable there. It's really fine for you to decide what and when to share with people about your MS, about how you feel about it, and for you to decide how to deal with their reactions. Sometimes that becomes a really big stress if you feel like you're dealing with their anxieties. One suggestion I've given to people is that providing family, particularly parents or adult children, with periodic updates about how you're taking care of yourself, and you sort of initiating that information instead of feeling like every time you talk to people they're saying, how's your MS, how's your MS, how do you feel today? That can be really annoying. That goes a long way if you keep them updated. Also, if you have largely invisible symptoms, that can be really a tough one because people have a tendency to underestimate and underappreciate what they themselves cannot see. And so trying to educate people about MS symptoms, including invisible symptoms, sometimes bringing the non-believer to a visit with you so that somebody else, a professional, can talk to them. That can really be very helpful so you don't feel like you're always in the middle. Sometimes people don't even believe that people have MS. I'm not sure you can do a whole lot about those folks, but relationships are our greatest source of joy in life and are often our greatest source of stress. So a little bit about starting new relationships, because sometimes people say, gosh, if I'm flying solo, how am I ever going to meet people? Who's going to want to be with me? Who's going to want to be in a relationship? I feel a bit like damaged goods. Remember that how you feel about your MS affects how you present yourself and what other people see. So if you're very focused on all the things you can't do, that is probably going to impact someone's relationship with you or wanting to relate to you, whereas if you focus on what you can do, they're likely to want to engage with you. First encounters with people, be it online or in person, do not require show and tell. You don't have to tell them everything. And this is where invisible symptoms kind of are a real catch-22, because if most of your symptoms are invisible, you can take more time, have more control over when and what you tell. On the other hand, those are the very ones that people don't understand very well. I think in thinking about disclosure, I encourage people to disclose when you would want to know, to think about if you were in the other person's shoes. And in general, if a relationship starts to feel like it's worth pursuing, it's worth disclosing. And one of the things you can do with folks is, instead of anticipating everything you think they should know or you want them to know about your MS, you can ask them to ask you questions. What is it that they're curious about? And that will be a process over time. That's not all going to happen on one encounter. And it's true that some people are going to be frightened off by illness, by your MS, and they are going to pull out of your life. Other people, in fact, will not. And many people that I've known over the last 20, 25 years with MS have actually gotten into healthier relationships after their MS than they were in before. So talking about the potential benefits for disclosing your MS. Telling can be stress reducing. And because keeping that secret, if you can keep it a secret because you have largely invisible symptoms, that can be really stressful. So kind of getting it out and seeing how the other person's going to deal with that can be stress reducing. also, then you get more support if the person now is involved and knowledgeable about your MS. And coping with your MS becomes a shared process. It helps to build respect and trust in the relationship, and it's a terrific way to practice your communication skills, which are just so essential in healthy relationships. So we want to finish up by talking just a little bit about flying solo successfully, like what's associated with that. And I wanted to share a quote from a woman in a telephone support group that I facilitate who is in her mid-70s. Her husband died almost 30 years ago, and she was diagnosed with MS many years ago. And she recently went and talked with to a class at a women's college and talked about her MS experience. And what she told them was that you are going to have a lot of crap thrown in your face over your life, but how you deal with it determines the kind of life that you had. And so I thought that was just really profound, and I think that is part of flying solo successfully, believing in your ability to exercise some control over your illness, and you do that through your attitude and goal setting that are realistic and optimistic at the same time, so being hopeful, very helpful, having routines that are health promoting, like your exercise and your diet and spending time with good people, and having flexibility, so being willing to plot that new course when turbulence occurs. Solo trip with MS. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy and Linda, for I feel like there's so much to cover in this topic of flying solo and living alone with MS, and I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge on. We have a few minutes for questions, and we did receive a few. And a person asks, as a leader for a support group, I've been asked about housing or apartments for people with MS and also service dogs. Could you provide some information on how to locate these types of services, and perhaps is this something that the National MS Society can help me with?
Yeah, this is Peggy. There is, in fact, I was looking at some things earlier this week. There's a whole document on the National MS Society website. It's a PDF that can be printed off if people want or transferred to your computer about sort of looking at options for housing, how to go about that, the process, what to look for that are very helpful. And there certainly are folks with MS who have service dogs. And I think probably even just looking at the organizations like PAWS, PAWS, is one of the organizations for service dogs. And I don't know specifically if the MS Society can facilitate that, but it never hurts to ask. And they do have case management services through the MS Society, which can also probably help with sort of that process of looking for housing and service dogs. And that service is free, so I would encourage people to access it.
Yeah, and you can dial 1-800-FIGHT-MS just to speak with someone at the Society, and they'll be able to help direct your call to the right. This next question, and I think, Linda, you might be able to help with this question. You provided a lot of pictures and different tips of how to stay safe while flying alone. And this person asks specifically about cooking. They say, cooking is becoming more of a hazard due to difficulty in gripping and also with losing my balance. I've burned my arms, hands, and fingers. Do you have any tips for me?
Oh, actually, some of the things I talked about are out there. You need to take steps of looking at what's happening. Are you burning yourself because your hands are not as sensitive as they used to be, and so you don't realize it until, in fact, you've picked up the spoon and then it hits you, and you look down and your hand's really red. And so you might want to take time to a couple of things. Talk to your physician or talk to an occupational therapist and get a little bit of an evaluation to make sure that it isn't an issue with sensitivity and you're not realizing how hot something is, and that's why you're burning yourself. And then on the other end of that spectrum, you also want to take extra precaution. If you realize that you're not as sensitive, make sure you always have a pot holder nearby. Use devices that have extra long handles so you stay further away from the hot pots. Keep that chair in the kitchen so that you can sit while you're doing something, so that you're more conserving some energy while you're cooking. Or even moving to my favorite picture of the crock pot, where you can put the things in and let it do the cooking, and you stay a little bit more away from the hot surfaces. Those are just some of the quick thoughts I have with cooking. And then, of course, doing whatever you can to be cautious, with the type of equipment you have.
Great. Thanks, Linda.
Mm-hmm.
This next question is about depression, so I think, Peggy, you would be able to help with this. They ask, how do you determine whether you're experiencing fatigue versus depression, since many of my symptoms seem so similar to each other?
Yeah, that's a good question, and there is a fair amount of overlap, and I think particularly for folks with significant fatigue, there are some very useful measures, paper and pencil questionnaires, that can help sort that out, that ask about a lot of symptoms that are possibly related to depression that wouldn't necessarily be related to MS. But I think the other thing that can be really helpful is to actually go and see somebody, even if you just go once, to help you sort that out, and almost like what came first, the chicken and the egg. And sometimes I found that people are really quite good at saying, okay, as I think back, what really sort of occurred first? Am I feeling depressed because I'm just so darn tired I don't want to do anything when I get home from work or over the weekend? Is that what's depressing me? It's primarily fatigue, or was I sort of feeling depressed first and fatigue is part of that? Also, looking at your sleep pattern, making sure you're getting a good night's sleep to try to sort of tease that apart. But I think talking with somebody who works with people who are depressed, filling out a questionnaire can really help to sort that out. But that's a tricky one. But I think people really sometimes are pretty good about actually really in their gut knowing which came first.
Another question we have here, and actually received this question through the registration process as well as from an attendee tonight. And they ask, when is it appropriate, or when should we think about bringing in an emergency alert system into the home?
My thoughts on that are it's never a bad way to go. I mean, do you really want to wait till we have that first emergency? No. And I think an emergency alert system, if you're living alone, is always a good thing. To look into that and, identify that any one of us, whether we have MS or not, when we're living alone, you're at risk for a fall that could be could leave you landed somewhere where you can't reach to get help. So my suggestion is it's never too soon to look into that.
I agree with that, Linda. I think also sometimes if the emergency alert system serves only the purpose of reducing anxiety, it's worth it.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Peggy and Linda, for again sharing all of your knowledge with us. I know that this again is a broad topic, and we did get a lot of questions, but we're running out of time. And so I do want to let everyone know that you can visit our website. And here's some resources on our website of different tools that you can take advantage of. But if you had any questions that we were not able to answer or address, we do have what's called Ask the Can Do Team. It's our Q&A portal. If you go to our website at mscando.org and look for the Ask the Can Do Team page, you can submit your question. We will receive your questions, and we'll try to direct them to the correct healthcare professional that we have on our team to answer that question for you. We also have our Can-Do library, which is full of all kinds of articles on different topics that you can browse through, and you can also go to our webinar archives page to view other webinars that we've recorded. I know that Peggy and Linda both mentioned a few that we have that might be of interest to those out. And before I share our next month's webinar topic, I do want to introduce you to a new research study that's called I Conquer MS. I Conquer MS is a new way to fight multiple sclerosis, and it empowers people living with MS to securely contribute their health data and ideas specifically for research. Your information that you provide will give insights into enabling new and more effective treatments that will be developed in the future. So if you're interested in participating, just visit www.iconquerms.org, register as a member, and you'll be able to contribute your information and answer some questions on the research study. So please be sure to check that out. And our webinar for next month, it is on the topic of staying vertical, reducing risks for falls, and that's with Kathy San Martino, who is a physical therapist, and Ann Molinix, who is an occupational therapist. So that will be on March 10th, and that will be at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is a good follow-up. I think this is a great follow-up topic to what we're talking about today. So please feel free to register for that and participate at your home or office. And again, but otherwise, thank you so much, Peggy and Linda, for joining us tonight, and thank you everyone for spending your Tuesday evening with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.